London, 1847. A young duchess stands accused before the most powerful court in England. The crime? Infidelity. The evidence? Lies wrapped in silk and whispers. Lady Eliza Whitmore Ashcroft, married at 18 to a man who treated her like furniture, now faces total ruin. The aristocracy circles like wolves, hungry for her disgrace. She has no allies, no defenders, no hope. But then, cutting through the venomous silence, a voice rings out, cold, commanding, and utterly unexpected. Her husband, the Duke who abandoned her, and he's about to set London ablaze. Stay until the end to see how this marriage of strangers becomes the scandal that changes everything. If you're watching from New York, London, Paris, or anywhere in between, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's begin. The rain came down in sheets the morning Eliza Whitmore became someone else. She stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, watching strange hands fasten pearls around her throat. The maid's fingers trembled slightly. Everyone knew what this day meant, what it cost. Outside, the November sky hung low and gray over London, pressing down like a lid on a coffin. "Miss Eliza, you look beautiful," the maid whispered, but her eyes told a different story. They held pity. Eliza didn't respond. Beautiful was a word for brides who chose their grooms, for girls who walked toward love instead of toward a ledger balanced in blood and desperation. She was 18 years old, and she was being sold. The dress was exquisite. French lace, seed pearls, ivory silk that pooled around her feet like spilled milk. Her mother had wept when it arrived, though whether from joy or grief Eliza couldn't tell. Probably both. Probably the complicated mathematics of relief and sorrow that came when you married your daughter to a man she'd met exactly twice, because the alternative was debtor's prison and disgrace. Her father, Lord Thomas Whitmore, had been a man of expensive tastes and catastrophic judgment. Horses, cards, investments and ventures that evaporated like morning fog. For years, he'd mortgaged their future piece by piece, always certain the next wager would restore everything. It never did. By the time he died, suddenly, his heart giving out over breakfast, he'd left behind nothing but debts that multiplied like weeds. The creditors had circled immediately. Eliza's mother had aged a decade in a month, her face going thin and desperate as she calculated what they had left to bargain with. The house would go, the furniture, the silver, everything except one asset that still held value in the marriage market, a daughter with an old name and an unblemished reputation. Enter Duke Sebastian Ashcroft. He was 32, unmarried, and so wealthy the exact figure was considered vulgar to discuss. His holdings stretched across 3 counties. His shipping concerns touched 5 continents. He moved through society with the kind of cold authority that made lesser men step aside without being asked. And for reasons Eliza's mother didn't question too closely, he needed a wife. The negotiation had been swift and bloodless. Duke Ashcroft would assume Lord Whitmore's debts in their entirety. In exchange, he would receive Eliza's hand, her name, and her cooperation in producing an heir. The word cooperation had hung in the air like smoke, undefined but clearly not requiring anything so messy as affection. Eliza had been present for exactly none of these discussions. She'd learned her fate over tea, her mother's voice brittle with forced cheer. "You're to be a duchess, darling. The Duke has been most generous." Generous. As if he were bestowing a gift rather than purchasing a solution to whatever problem required a sudden, convenient marriage. Their first meeting had been a formality. He'd arrived at the townhouse in a black carriage, dressed in charcoal gray, his expression as readable as granite. He was handsome in the way a knife was handsome, sharp, clean, cold. Dark hair swept back from a face of severe angles, eyes the color of a winter ocean, mouth set in a line that suggested smiling was something he'd heard about but never attempted. "Lady Eliza," he'd said, offering the barest bow. "Your Grace," she'd replied, curtsying because that was what you did, even when your heart was screaming. They'd sat in the parlor for exactly 20 minutes. He'd asked perfunctory questions about her health, her education, her interests. She'd answered with equal flatness, understanding this was theater, not courtship. He wasn't trying to know her. He was confirming she could speak in complete sentences and wouldn't embarrass him at state dinners. At the end, he'd stood. The wedding will be November 12th. My secretary will handle the arrangements. And that had been that. The second meeting was the day before the wedding, when he'd arrived with a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, a massive emerald surrounded by diamonds, old and heavy, and worth more than her family's entire estate had been. It belonged to my grandmother, he'd said, sliding it onto her finger with all the warmth of a banker completing a transaction. You'll wear it tomorrow, and at all public functions thereafter. It's beautiful, Eliza had managed, though the weight of it felt like a shackle. It's appropriate, he'd corrected. Then he'd left. Now, staring at her reflection, Eliza touched the emerald. It caught the weak morning light, throwing green fire across her skin. Appropriate. Not cherished, not meaningful. Appropriate. She wanted to tear it off and hurl it through the window. Instead, she stood perfectly still and let the maid arrange her veil. The church was St. Margaret's, Westminster, because of course it was. Nothing but the most prestigious venue for the Duke of Ashcroft's wedding. The pews filled with London's elite, all dressed in their finest, all whispering behind gloved hands. Eliza stood in the vestibule, her mother fussing with the train of her dress. "You look perfect, darling. Absolutely perfect." Her mother's voice was too bright, stretched thin over panic. "The Duke is a good match. You'll want for nothing." Except love, Eliza thought. Except choice. But she didn't say it. What would be the point? The die was cast, the contract signed, the debts transferred. She was a line item in a ledger now, a problem solved. "It's time," someone said. The organ began. That deep, sonorous sound that was supposed to fill the soul with joy, but instead felt like a dirge. Eliza's uncle appeared, her mother's brother, pressed into service to walk her down the aisle since her father was 6 months dead. He offered his arm with an encouraging smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Courage, girl," he murmured. She took his arm, lifted her chin, and stepped into the church. The walk down the aisle was a blur of faces, curious, envious, judgmental. She saw Lady Pemberton, who'd once remarked at a ball that it was such a shame about poor Eliza's circumstances. Saw Lord Harrington, who'd quietly withdrawn his son's tepid courtship the moment the Whitmore debts became public knowledge. Saw 100 variations of polite cruelty dressed in silk and jewels, and at the end of that gauntlet stood Sebastian Ashcroft. He didn't turn as she approached, didn't shift or show any flicker of emotion. He simply stood, ramrod straight in his black morning coat, staring at the altar as if she were just another appointment in his calendar. When she reached him, he finally looked at her. Their eyes met. Nothing. No warmth, no reassurance. No acknowledgement that this was her wedding day, that she was giving up her entire life to save her family from ruin. Just cool assessment, like she was a horse he was considering purchasing. Then he turned back to the Archbishop. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. The Archbishop's voice rolled through the ancient vows. To have and to hold, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. Words that should have meant something, should have been sacred, reduced to mere formality. Do you, Sebastian Edward Ashcroft, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Flat. Factual. Do you, Eliza Catherine Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Her throat closed. For one wild second, she considered saying no. Just no. Turning and running, debts be damned, let them take the house, let society devour them. At least she'd still have herself. I do, she heard herself say. The emerald on her finger caught the light from the stained glass windows, bleeding green across her white gloves. I now pronounce you man and wife. Sebastian turned to her, lifted her veil with practiced efficiency, leaned in and pressed his lips to hers in what was technically a kiss, but felt more like a stamp on a document. Sealed. The organ swelled. The congregation applauded. Eliza Whitmore ceased to exist. Duchess Eliza Ashcroft took her first breath. The wedding breakfast was held at Ashcroft House, the Duke's London residence, a palatial Georgian mansion in Mayfair that made Eliza's former home look like a gardener's cottage. She moved through the reception in a daze, accepting congratulations from people she didn't know, smiling until her face ached. Sebastian stayed close enough to satisfy propriety, but never touched her except when absolutely necessary. When they cut the cake, his hand over hers on the knife felt like a stranger's. "You're doing well," he murmured at one point, the first words he'd spoken to her since the ceremony. Just a few more hours, as if enduring her own wedding was a performance she needed to get through. Lady Winters approached, all smiles and false warmth. "My dear Duchess, what a beautiful ceremony. You must be absolutely floating." "It was lovely, thank you," Eliza replied automatically. "And the Duke is such a catch. Half the mothers in London had their daughters lined up for him. You know, a calculating pause. It's quite surprising he chose so quickly. But then, I suppose when love strikes..." She let it trail off, eyes glittering with curiosity. Love. The word was so absurd, Eliza almost laughed. "We're very fortunate," she said instead, because that was the script, the lie they were all selling. Sebastian materialized at her elbow. "Lady Winters, how kind of you to attend." "Your Grace, I was just telling your lovely bride how romantic it all is." "Indeed." His tone could have frozen wine. "If you'll excuse us, I need to introduce the Duchess to Lord Pemberton." He steered Eliza away with a hand on her lower back, their first real touch since the kiss at the altar. Even through layers of silk and corset, it felt impersonal, clinical. "You don't need to rescue me," Eliza said quietly. "I wasn't rescuing you. I was preventing Lady Winters from fishing for gossip to spread at her next salon." He guided her toward a group of older gentlemen. "These are business associates. Smile, nod, say as little as possible." It wasn't advice. It was an order. She smiled, nodded, said as little as possible. Finally, mercifully, the guests began to depart. The November dusk came early, and carriages lined up outside to collect London's finest and carry them back to their own lives, their own dramas. Eliza stood in the grand foyer, still in her wedding dress, watching them go. Her mother had left an hour earlier, tearful and relieved, her daughter safe, her debts erased, her conscience apparently clear. When the last guest departed, the house fell silent except for the quiet movement of servants clearing away the evidence of celebration. Sebastian appeared from his study. He'd removed his coat and cravat, rolled up his sleeves. It was the most informal she'd seen him, and somehow it made him feel even more distant, like she was glimpsing someone private, someone she had no right to know. "The staff will show you to your rooms," he said. "Your things have been moved from your mother's house." "Thank you." She paused. "Where are your rooms?" "The East Wing." The mansion was large enough to have wings. Of course it was. "And mine?" "The West Wing." He said it matter-of-factly, as if this were perfectly normal, as if husbands and wives regularly lived in separate wings of their own home. "Mrs. Dorset, the housekeeper, will help you settle. If you need anything, inform her." Not him. Her. "I see." Eliza kept her voice level. "And will I see you at dinner, perhaps?" "I'm leaving for Dover tomorrow morning. Business with the shipping company. I'll be gone approximately 2 weeks." Of course he was leaving. "I wasn't informed," she said carefully. "You are now." He turned toward the stairs, then paused. Eliza. It was the first time he'd used her name since the ceremony. She looked up, some small, stupid part of her hoping, "This marriage is what it needs to be. You'll have everything you require, comfort, security, position. In exchange, I expect you to manage the household, represent the family appropriately in society, and in time, provide an heir." His eyes were unreadable in the dim light. "Beyond that, we need not trouble each other. It's a business arrangement. It's better if we both remember that." The words landed like blows, each one precise and devastating. "I understand," Eliza managed. "Good. I'll see you when I return." He climbed the stairs toward the East Wing and disappeared. Eliza stood alone in the foyer of her new home, still wearing her wedding dress, the emerald heavy on her finger. Mrs. Dorset appeared, a severe woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and a face that suggested smiling was against house rules. "Your Grace," she said, the title sounding strange and formal in Eliza's ears. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your chambers." Eliza followed, her dress rustling against marble floors, through corridors hung with portraits of Ashcroft ancestors who stared down with varying degrees of disapproval. The house was beautiful, objectively, stunningly beautiful, and absolutely lifeless. Like a museum, like a tomb. Her rooms were in the West Wing, as promised, a suite consisting of a bedroom, dressing room, and private sitting room, all decorated in shades of cream and gold, elegant and impersonal. Fresh flowers stood on every surface, but they felt like an afterthought, like something the servants did because it was expected, not because anyone cared. "The Duke's chambers are on the opposite side of the house," Mrs. Dorset said, confirming what Eliza already knew. "There is a connecting door through the portrait gallery, should you need to reach him." Should she need to reach him? As if that would ever happen, as if he wanted to be reached. "Breakfast is served at 8 in the morning room, luncheon at 1, dinner at 7. The Duke prefers punctuality." Mrs. Dorset moved toward the door. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" Your Grace. She was Your Grace now, Duchess of Ashcroft, mistress of this beautiful, empty house. "No, thank you." The housekeeper left, closing the door with a soft click. Eliza stood in the center of her gilded cage and finally let herself feel it. The weight of what had just happened, what she'd just agreed to. A marriage without love. A life without warmth. Years and years of this beautiful isolation, playing the role of Duchess for a man who'd made it clear she was nothing more than a convenience. She walked to the window. Outside, London sprawled in the gathering darkness, thousands of lives unfolding, thousands of people going home to families who actually wanted them. Her reflection stared back from the glass. A girl in a wedding dress, pearls at her throat, an emerald on her finger worth more than she was. She thought about her father, dead in his debts. Her mother, safe now but gone. The life she'd had, small and uncertain but hers, traded away for this. A business arrangement. Better if they both remembered that. Eliza pressed her palm against the cold glass and let herself cry, quietly, privately, in this room where no one would see or care. The tears came hard and fast, soaking into the expensive lace, salting her lips. Then, because she was her father's daughter, and collapse was a luxury she couldn't afford, she stopped. She wiped her face, straightened her spine, removed the veil, and began the long process of unfastening the dress. Hundreds of tiny pearl buttons running down her back. Her fingers shook, but she kept going, methodical, determined. If this was to be her life, she would survive it. She would learn to navigate this house, these rules, this cold marriage. She would become what was expected. She would be the Duchess of Ashcroft, even if it killed the girl named Eliza in the process. The wedding dress pooled at her feet like shed skin. She stepped out of it, leaving it where it fell, and walked to the bed. The sheets were cool and smooth, scented with lavender. Her wedding night, alone. Eliza climbed into the massive four-poster bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling. In the East Wing, in his own rooms, Sebastian Ashcroft sat at his desk reviewing shipping manifests by candlelight. He worked until well past midnight, until the numbers blurred and his eyes burned, until he was certain his new wife would be asleep. Only then did he allow himself to lean back in his chair and close his eyes. He'd done what needed to be done. Secured the lineage, satisfied the expectations, protected himself from the complications that came with genuine attachment. It was practical, efficient, better this way. He almost believed it. The days bled into each other like watercolors left in the rain. Eliza woke each morning in her vast bed, dressed by silent maids, and descended to the breakfast room at precisely 8 o'clock. She sat alone at a table built for 12, eating toast and eggs while reading day-old newspapers, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Sebastian had been gone 3 days, then a week, then 10 days. No letters arrived, no messages, just silence stretching across the house like fog. Mrs. Dorset ran the household with military precision, and it became clear within hours that she'd been doing so for years without requiring input from anyone, least of all a new duchess, barely out of the schoolroom. When Eliza tried to discuss the week's menus, the housekeeper had smiled thinly. "His Grace prefers consistency, Your Grace. We've maintained the same rotation for 5 years. I wouldn't want to disrupt his routine." When Eliza suggested rearranging the flowers in the drawing room, they were beautiful but stiff, formal. Mrs. Dorset's smile grew thinner still. The arrangements are ordered from Hatchard's every Monday and Thursday. His Grace's mother established the account. I'm sure he'd prefer we honor her memory. His Grace prefers. His Grace's mother. His Grace's routine. Never. What would you like, Your Grace? The message was clear. Eliza was a guest in this house, a temporary disruption to a well-oiled machine that had been running perfectly well without her and would continue to do so whether she participated or not. So she stopped trying. She spent her days wandering the portrait gallery, studying the Ashcroft ancestors, stern men and cold-eyed women stretching back 2 centuries. She read in the library where thousands of books lined mahogany shelves, their spines barely cracked. She sat in the music room where a beautiful pianoforte stood draped in dust covers, clearly untouched for years. Everything in Ashcroft House was pristine, expensive, and utterly devoid of life. On the 11th day, Sebastian returned. Eliza heard the commotion from her sitting room, the front door opening, servants rushing to attendance, Mrs. Dorset's voice rising in greeting. She stood, smoothed her dress, and waited. He didn't come to her rooms. She waited through luncheon, through tea, through the long afternoon as shadows stretched across the gardens. Finally, as dinner approached, she made her way to the dining room. If he wouldn't seek her out, she'd simply be where she was expected to be. He was already seated when she arrived, reading correspondence, still in his traveling clothes. He glanced up as she entered. Eliza? Welcome home, Your Grace. He set down the letter. Sebastian, you may use my name. Of course. She took her seat at the opposite end of the table, 12 feet of polished mahogany between them. How was Dover? Productive. The new warehouses are nearly complete. He accepted wine from a footman. I trust you've settled in adequately? Yes, thank you. Mrs. Dorset indicated no issues. None at all. The conversation died there. They ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of silver on china and the distant clatter from the kitchens. Eliza watched him over the expanse of table. He ate methodically, occasionally pausing to make notes in a small leather book he kept beside his plate. Everything about him was controlled, precise. No wasted movement, no excess emotion. Will you be leaving again soon? She asked finally, unable to bear the silence. Next week. The Manchester mills require inspection. I see. And how long will you be gone? A fortnight, perhaps 3 weeks. 3 weeks. She'd been married not quite 2. Perhaps I could accompany you, she said, the words out before she could stop them. I've never seen a mill. It might be... No. The word fell like a guillotine blade. The mills are no place for a duchess, he continued, not unkindly, but absolutely final. The conditions are harsh and the work tedious. You'd be bored within an hour. I might surprise you. I doubt that. He returned to his meal. Your place is here, managing the household and preparing for the season. Lady Pemberton will be calling on you soon to discuss your presentation at court. That should occupy your time sufficiently. Your place, as if she were a piece of furniture that belonged in a specific room. Eliza set down her fork carefully, fighting the urge to throw it. I don't require occupation, Sebastian. I require purpose. Your purpose is to be the Duchess of Ashcroft. He met her eyes, his own unreadable. That is no small thing. Most women would be grateful. Most women weren't purchased to cover their father's debts. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and true. Sebastian's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance that she'd named the thing they were both pretending didn't exist. I paid those debts willingly, he said quietly. In exchange for a wife of good family who understood the requirements of this position. I thought we had an understanding. We do. A business arrangement. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and didn't care. You've made that abundantly clear. Then I fail to see the issue. The issue is that I'm 20 years old and being treated like a child, or worse, like an expensive vase you've purchased and now need to find a shelf for. That's not... You left the day after our wedding. You didn't write. You didn't send word. When you returned, you didn't even tell me you were home. I had to hear the commotion from the servants. Her hands shook slightly and she pressed them flat on the table. I understand this isn't a love match. I understand my role. But I am here, Sebastian. Whether you like it or not, I am your wife. The least you could do is acknowledge my existence." Silence. Long and heavy. Then Sebastian pushed back from the table and stood. "You're right," he said, his voice tight. "I apologize for the discourtesy. I'll make sure to inform you of my travel plans going forward." He moved toward the door. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." "Sebastian?" But he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt worse than a slam. Eliza sat alone at the absurdly long table, surrounded by footmen pretending they hadn't heard every word, and wondered if this was what the rest of her life would look like. She didn't touch the rest of her dinner. True to his word, Sebastian left for Manchester the following week. This time he informed her at breakfast, his tone scrupulously polite. "I'll be departing Tuesday morning. I expect to return by the end of the month. Thank you for letting me know." Of course. They were strangers being excruciatingly courteous to each other. It was almost worse than the silence. After he left, the house settled back into its tomb-like quiet. Eliza tried to find ways to fill the hours. She wrote letters to her mother, careful, cheerful lies about how wonderful everything was. She attempted needlework and abandoned it after stabbing her finger 3 times. She played the pianoforte until Mrs. Dorset appeared, tight-lipped, to mention that His Grace preferred quiet in the house. London society began to call. Lady Pemberton arrived first, sweeping in with her daughter Cecilia and an agenda that had nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with positioning. "My dear Duchess," she gushed, air-kissing Eliza's cheeks, "you must tell us everything. The wedding was divine, of course, but we've heard so little since. The Duke keeps you quite hidden away." "I've been settling in," Eliza said carefully. Of course, such a large house to manage. Though I imagine Mrs. Dorset makes it easy. She's been here forever, hasn't she? Such a treasure." The words were kind, but the subtext was clear. "You're decorative, dear, but unnecessary." Cecilia, a vapid girl of 19, giggled. "Mother, you're embarrassing her. I'm sure the Duchess has been very busy with Duchess things." "Indeed," Lady Pemberton agreed. "Now, we must discuss your presentation at court. It's absolutely essential you make the right impression. The Queen is quite particular, and as the Duke's wife, you'll be under intense scrutiny." The visit stretched for an hour, filled with veiled criticisms disguised as advice. Eliza's dress was lovely, but perhaps a touch provincial. Her hair was charming, but she might consider a more fashionable style. Her manners were adequate, but she should really consult with a deportment instructor before the season began. When they finally left, Eliza felt thoroughly dissected and found wanting. Other calls followed. Lady Winters, fishing for gossip. The Duchess of Somerset, offering patronizing guidance. Mrs. Hartwick, whose sons had all married better and who made sure Eliza knew it. They came in a steady stream, these society women, and Eliza began to understand the game. She wasn't being welcomed, she was being evaluated. They wanted to see if the Duke's sudden mysterious marriage was a scandal waiting to unfold, or simply a boring business arrangement. The whispers had already started, apparently. "Such a quick wedding," she overheard Lady Winters murmur to Mrs. Hartwick during one particularly excruciating tea. "One wonders if there was a particular urgency." "The Whitmore debts were certainly urgent," Mrs. Hartwick replied. "Though I suppose the Duke had his reasons. He's always been so peculiar about his privacy." They both glanced at Eliza, then away, smiling. The implication was clear. She'd been bought. Everyone knew it, and they were all waiting to see how the transaction would play out. Set. 3 weeks into Sebastian's absence, an invitation arrived. It was for the Ashford Ball, the social event of the autumn season, hosted by the Earl of Ashford at his estate in Kensington. Attendance was mandatory for anyone who mattered in London society. Mrs. Dorset brought it to Eliza's sitting room personally. "The ball is Saturday week, Your Grace. His Grace always attends. I've taken the liberty of informing the modiste to prepare an appropriate gown." "Will the Duke be back by then?" "I couldn't say, Your Grace, but you'll need to attend regardless. His absence would be noted, but yours would be seen as a slight." Of course it would. The gown arrived 3 days later, a creation of midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, cut to showcase without being immodest. It was beautiful and expensive and made Eliza feel like a doll being dressed for display. Sebastian returned the night before the ball, arriving late enough that Eliza was already in bed. She heard the commotion, then his footsteps in the corridor, pausing outside her door. For a moment she thought he might knock. He didn't. In the morning, he appeared at breakfast looking tired but composed. "The Ashford ball is tonight," he said without preamble. "We'll depart at 8. The carriage will be ready." "I'm aware." "Good." He accepted coffee from a footman. "There will be expectations. The society will be watching to see how we present as a couple." "And how should we present?" "United, comfortable, as if we've been married for years rather than weeks." He met her eyes. "Can you do that?" Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. Even this, their first public appearance as husband and wife, was just another performance, another transaction. "I can play my part," she said quietly. "I'm not asking you to play." "Yes, you are. That's all this is. A performance. You've made that very clear." His jaw tightened. "Eliza, I'll be ready at 8, Your Grace." She left the breakfast room before he could respond, her breakfast untouched, her hands shaking with anger she couldn't quite name. The Earl of Ashford's estate blazed with light, visible from half a mile away. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging London's finest onto red carpets, everyone glittering with jewels and ambition. Eliza sat beside Sebastian in their carriage, the silence between them thick enough to choke on. She dressed carefully. The blue gown, the Ashcroft emeralds at her throat and ears, her hair swept up in an elegant twist that had taken her maid 2 hours to achieve. She looked perfect. She felt like screaming. "Remember," Sebastian said as they approached the entrance, "we're presenting a united front. Stay close to me, deflect personal questions. If anyone asks about our marriage, I'll tell them it's wonderful," Eliza finished flatly, "that you're attentive and devoted, and I've never been happier. You don't need to be sarcastic. I'm practicing my performance." The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. Sebastian stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Eliza down. His grip was firm, impersonal. They entered the ballroom together. The space was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across marble floors, musicians playing from a raised platform, hundreds of guests in their finest, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Conversations died as they entered. Heads turned. The Duke and his new Duchess. Sebastian's hand found the small of Eliza's back, the same clinical touch from their wedding reception, guiding, controlling. "Lord Ashford is approaching," he murmured. "Smile." She smiled. "Your Grace, Your Grace!" The Earl was a florid man of 60, already drunk despite the early hour. "What an honor! And the new Duchess, my dear, you're absolutely radiant. Ashcroft, you devil, keeping her locked away all this time." "Merely allowing her to settle in," Sebastian replied smoothly. "But she was eager to attend your legendary ball." "Was she now?" The Earl's eyes glittered with curiosity. "And how are you finding married life, my dear?" "It's everything I hoped for," Eliza lied, the words tasting like ash. "Excellent, excellent. You must meet my wife. She's been dying to make your acquaintance." They were swept into the crowd. Sebastian's hand never left her back, steering, positioning, controlling the narrative. They moved from group to group, Sebastian making introductions, Eliza playing her role perfectly, the devoted wife, the grateful Duchess, the lie. She was good at it, she discovered. Good at the smile that didn't reach her eyes, the laugh that sounded genuine, the subtle deflections that kept people from asking too many questions. Perhaps she'd learned more from her mother than she'd thought. An hour in, Sebastian was pulled away by a group of businessmen wanting to discuss railway investments. He hesitated. "I'll be fine," Eliza assured him. "Lady Pemberton is here. I'll join her." He looked uncertain, then nodded. "I won't be long." But he was. Eliza found Lady Pemberton holding court near the refreshment table, surrounded by the usual gaggle of society women. They made room for her, because she was a duchess now and they had to, but the welcome was perfunctory. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton cooed, "you look lovely. That gown must have cost a fortune." "The Duke has been very generous. I'm sure he has, though we've seen so little of him lately, all that business travel." She sipped her champagne delicately. You must get quite lonely in that big house. I keep myself occupied. Do you? Lady Winters leaned in. I heard the Duke was in Manchester for nearly a month. That's quite a long time for a newly married couple to be apart. The others were watching now, scenting blood. His business required his attention, Eliza said carefully. Of course, Mrs. Hartwick agreed. Though one does wonder what could be so pressing that he'd leave such a beautiful young wife alone for so long. The implication hung there, ugly and clear. Perhaps, a new voice cut in, smooth and amused, the Duke simply trusts his wife. What a novel concept. Eliza turned. The woman who'd spoken was stunning, tall and elegant, with midnight black hair and eyes the color of amber. She was perhaps 35, dressed in crimson silk that made everyone else look washed out, and she radiated the kind of confidence that came from years of knowing she was the most interesting person in any room. Lady Miranda Vale, Lady Pemberton said, her voice cooling several degrees. How lovely to see you. I'm sure. Lady Miranda's smile was sharp. You'll forgive me for stealing the Duchess away, but I've been dying to meet her, and you've been monopolizing her quite rudely. Before anyone could protest, she'd linked her arm through Eliza's and steered her away. Thank you, Eliza breathed once they were out of earshot. That was becoming uncomfortable. That was character assassination in evening gloves, Miranda corrected. They were 3 minutes from suggesting you're either barren or having an affair, probably both. She snagged 2 glasses of champagne from a passing servant and handed one to Eliza. Welcome to London society, darling. It's a viper pit, but at least the wine is decent. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. You're very frank. Life's too short to be otherwise. I'm Miranda Vale, in case that wasn't clear. Widow, scandalous woman, and apparently your new friend, whether you like it or not. I like it, Eliza said, and meant it. Miranda studied her with those sharp amber eyes. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Some vapid girl who'd won the lottery by snagging Sebastian Ashcroft. She tilted her head. But you're miserable, aren't you? Beautifully dressed, perfectly composed, and absolutely miserable. The observation was so accurate and unexpected that Eliza felt her careful mask crack. I'm fine, she managed. You're a terrible liar. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Your secret's safe with... She stopped mid-sentence, her gaze shifting to something over Eliza's shoulder. Her expression changed, still amused, but with an edge of something else, something private. Well, she said softly, there's the man of the hour. Eliza turned. Sebastian was making his way through the crowd, his face carefully neutral. But when he spotted them, spotted Miranda, something flickered across his expression. Surprise. Then something more complicated. Recognition. He reached them, his eyes on Miranda. Lady Vale, I didn't realize you'd be attending. Ashford always invites me. He has hope that one day I'll marry again and stop horrifying his wife. Miranda's smile was playful, familiar. You look well, Sebastian. Manchester must have agreed with you. It was productive. They were looking at each other in a way that made Eliza feel like an intruder. There was history there. Something unspoken, but obvious. I was just getting acquainted with your lovely wife, Miranda continued, turning that amber gaze on Eliza. She's delightful. You're a lucky man. I'm aware, Sebastian said, but he still wasn't looking at Eliza. An awkward silence fell. I should return these glasses, Eliza said, desperate to escape whatever this was. If you'll excuse me, don't be silly, stay. But Miranda's attention was still on Sebastian, reading something in his expression that Eliza couldn't decipher. Unless you need to steal her away for a waltz, the orchestra is starting. Actually, Sebastian began. Your Grace, a voice interrupted. Lord Pemberton, approaching with another gentleman. Forgive the intrusion, but Lord Hartley here is quite eager to discuss the railway proposal. Might we steal a moment? Sebastian's jaw tightened with visible frustration. Of course. Eliza, I... Go, she said quietly. I'm fine. He hesitated, looking between her and Miranda, then allowed himself to be pulled away, leaving Eliza alone with the woman he clearly knew far too well. Miranda watched him go, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Eliza with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. So, she said lightly, Shall we get very drunk and I'll tell you all about your husband's secrets? Or would you prefer to maintain the polite fiction that you actually know the man you married? Eliza stared at her, champagne going warm in her hand, the ballroom spinning slightly around her. What do you mean? Miranda's smile turned sad. Oh, darling, you really don't know, do you? Know what? But before Miranda could answer, a commotion rose from the far side of the ballroom. Voices raising. A woman's sharp laugh cutting through the music. Both of them turned. A young woman in emerald silk was holding court near the orchestra, gesturing dramatically, her voice carrying across the room with the particular clarity of someone who wanted to be overheard. Absolutely shocking, really, but I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. The Whitmores were always desperate, and the Duke needed someone respectable enough to present at court. A business arrangement, nothing more. Everyone knows she trapped him with her family's debts. Eliza's blood went cold. She couldn't see who was speaking, but she could hear every word. So could half the ballroom. Conversations were stopping. People were turning. And now he leaves her alone for weeks at a time while he handles his actual interests elsewhere. I heard from Lady Pemberton's maid that they don't even share a... That's enough! Sebastian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The ballroom went silent. He was standing near the speaker now. Eliza could see her, a blonde girl she didn't recognize, her face going pale as Sebastian stared her down. Lord Ashcroft, she stammered. I was only... You were maligning my wife, he said coldly. In public, at a social function. Would you like to continue, or shall we consider this conversation finished? The girl looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. I apologize, Your Grace. I meant no disrespect. Then I suggest you show respect by keeping your uninformed opinions to yourself. He turned, his gaze sweeping the room, finding Eliza across the crowd. If you'll all excuse me, I believe I promised my wife a waltz. He crossed the ballroom, the crowd parting before him. When he reached Eliza, he extended his hand. His expression was still cold, but his eyes held something else. A question, maybe, or a plea. Dance with me, he said quietly. Not a command. A request. Eliza's hand was shaking as she took his. He led her to the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. His hand settled at her waist, hers on his shoulder, and they began to move. Everyone was watching. I'm sorry, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. That was unconscionable. It was true, Eliza replied just as quietly. We are a business arrangement. We don't share. We're not... It's no one's business but ours. They turned across the floor, moving in perfect synchronization despite never having danced together before. You defended me, Eliza said, and hated how much it mattered. Of course I did. You're my wife. Your convenient wife, your purchased wife. His hand tightened at her waist. You're my wife, he repeated, and there was something almost fierce in his voice. That means something to me, even if you don't believe it. She wanted to argue. Wanted to throw his own words back at him. Business arrangement. Better if we both remember that. But his eyes were on hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something real there. Not warmth exactly, but not cold indifference either. Something. The waltz ended. They stood there for a heartbeat too long, still holding each other, the ballroom holding its collective breath. Then Miranda's voice cut through the moment. How romantic! She was standing at the edge of the dance floor, champagne in hand, that sharp smile back in place. You two make quite the picture, the Duke and his devoted bride. There was something in her tone, something knowing and cruel and sad all at once. Sebastian's hand dropped from Eliza's waist. Miranda, he said, a warning in his voice. Don't worry, darling, I won't say anything to spoil the performance. She raised her glass in a mock toast. To new beginnings and old endings. May you both get exactly what you deserve. She drank, turned, and walked away, leaving Eliza and Sebastian standing in the center of the dance floor, surrounded by whispers and speculation and the weight of whatever history they clearly shared. Eliza looked up at her husband, this man she'd married, this stranger she was bound to, and saw his jaw tight, his eyes tracking Miranda's departure. Who is she to you? Eliza asked. Sebastian looked at her, and for just a second his mask slipped. She saw exhaustion there, and something that might have been regret. Someone I used to know, he said finally. Someone who no longer matters. But his voice said otherwise. And watching him watch Miranda disappear into the crowd, Eliza understood with sudden, devastating clarity that she wasn't just competing with duty or distance or his cold practicality. She was competing with a ghost. The music started again. The crowd shifted. Life went on. But standing there in her beautiful gown, her husband's emeralds at her throat, Eliza finally understood the true dimensions of her cage. She'd been bought, yes, traded for debts and duty, but someone else still owned his heart. The carriage ride home was suffocating. Sebastian sat across from her, staring out the window at the dark London streets, his face unreadable in the shifting shadows. Eliza pressed herself against the opposite corner, the emeralds at her throat feeling like a noose, her beautiful gown suddenly too tight, too heavy. Neither of them spoke. When they arrived at Ashcroft House, Sebastian helped her down from the carriage with mechanical courtesy, then disappeared into his study without a word. Eliza climbed the stairs to her rooms alone, her feet aching, her heart a stone in her chest. She'd been bought for a marriage, but someone else still owned his heart. The maid helped her undress in silence, unlacing the gown, removing the jewels, brushing out her hair. When she was finally alone, Eliza sat at her vanity and stared at her reflection. The Duchess of Ashcroft looked back at her, polished, elegant, empty. A beautiful shell with nothing inside. She pressed her hands flat on the vanity, willing herself not to cry, not to break, not to give in to the howling despair that wanted to consume her. But her hands were shaking, and somewhere in the east wing, her husband was thinking about another woman. Morning came gray and cold. Eliza woke with her head pounding and her throat raw, though she couldn't remember crying. She dressed mechanically, descended to breakfast, and found Sebastian already there, reading the Times. He looked up when she entered. "We need to discuss last night," he said without preamble. "Do we?" Eliza poured herself tea with hands that trembled only slightly. "The gossip will be everywhere by now. That girl's comments, Miranda's presence, our dance. It will all be twisted and analyzed." He set down the paper. "We need to control the narrative." "By narrative, you mean the lie." "I mean our marriage, our public image." His voice was tight. "I won't have you subjected to malicious rumors, even when they're true." "They're not." He stopped, jaw clenching. "Eliza, whatever you think you saw last night, I saw you look at her the way you've never looked at me." The words came out flat, factual. "I saw history. I saw something that mattered to you. And then I watched the entire ballroom see it too." Silence stretched between them. "Miranda and I were acquainted years ago," Sebastian said finally, each word careful. "Before my father died, before I inherited the title. It ended badly. Last night was the first time I'd seen her in 5 years. And you still reacted like she'd struck you." "Because she surprised me. Nothing more." "You're lying." Eliza met his eyes. "You're lying to me the same way I've been lying to everyone else, smiling and pretending and playing the role. But I'm tired, Sebastian. I'm so tired of pretending." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "What do you want from me?" "The truth. For once, just the truth." "The truth?" His voice rose. "The truth is, I married you because I needed a wife and you needed your family saved from ruin. The truth is, that was the arrangement we both agreed to. The truth is, I've given you everything I promised. Security, position, respect. I've defended you publicly, protected your reputation, treated you with courtesy. What more do you want?" "I want you to stop acting like I'm a transaction. That's what marriage is in our world. Transactions, alliances. No one marries for love. They marry for advantage. And anyone who tells you different is selling you fairy stories." "So you've never loved anyone?" The question hung there, sharp and dangerous. Sebastian's expression shuddered completely. "This conversation is over." "That's what I thought." Eliza stood, abandoning her untouched breakfast. "You can control the narrative all you want, Your Grace, but you can't control the truth." She left him standing there alone in the breakfast room and climbed the stairs to her rooms on shaking legs. Mrs. Dorset intercepted her in the corridor. "Your Grace, Lady Pemberton is calling. She's in the drawing room." Of course she was. The vultures were already circling. Tell her I'm indisposed. She was quite insistent, Your Grace. She said it was urgent. Everything was always urgent with these women, every bit of gossip, every scandalous whisper. Fine, I'll be down in a moment. Eliza checked her reflection, smoothed her dress, arranged her face into the pleasant mask she was learning to wear. Then she descended to face whatever fresh hell society had prepared for her. Lady Pemberton was perched on the settee like a well-dressed crow, her eyes bright with barely contained excitement. "My dear Duchess," she gushed as Eliza entered, "I came as soon as I heard. I simply had to see if you were all right." "I'm perfectly well, thank you." "Are you? Because there's been the most dreadful talk since last night. That horrid girl, Miss Thornberry, can you imagine? Speaking about you in such a manner. And then Lady Vale appearing, looking so intimate with the Duke." "Lady Vale is an old acquaintance of my husband's," Eliza said coolly. "Nothing more." "Oh, but my dear, everyone knows about their history. How they were engaged, how she threw him over for Lord Vale's fortune, how devastated the Duke was." The words hit like physical blows. Engaged. Sebastian and Miranda had been engaged. "I wasn't aware," Eliza managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. Lady Pemberton's eyes glittered. "Oh dear, he didn't tell you?" "Well, it was quite the scandal at the time, 5 years ago, before she became Lady Vale. They were madly in love, everyone said so, but then Lord Vale made her a better offer. He was richer, older, likely to die soon and leave her a wealthy widow, which of course he did." She leaned in conspiratorially. "The Duke never quite recovered, they say. Never courted another woman seriously until you. Until he needed a wife for duty and found a desperate girl with debts to pay." The room tilted slightly. Eliza gripped the arm of her chair. "How kind of you to inform me," she said, her voice ice. "I thought you should know, dear, especially given the rumors that are starting to spread." "What rumors?" "Well," Lady Pemberton feigned reluctance, but her eagerness showed through. "Some are saying that Lady Vale's return to London is what prompted the Duke's sudden marriage, that he married you to make her jealous, to show her what she'd lost. And others are saying—" She paused delicately. "Others are saying that perhaps the Duke's affections haven't shifted as much as one might hope." "That's absurd." "Is it? He was gone for nearly a month after your wedding, and Lady Vale was also out of town during that time, visiting her country estate, she said, in Dover." Dover, where Sebastian had been. No. "I think," Eliza said, standing on legs that felt like water, "this visit is over. My dear, I didn't mean to upset you. Thank you for calling, Lady Pemberton. Mrs. Dorset will show you out." She left the drawing room before the older woman could protest, walking blindly through the corridors until she found herself in the portrait gallery. The Ashcroft ancestors stared down at her, their painted faces stern and disapproving. None of them had married for love either, but at least they probably hadn't been second choices. She stood there, trembling, trying to piece together the puzzle. Sebastian and Miranda, engaged and in love. Miranda choosing wealth over him. Sebastian, heartbroken, never courting seriously again, until suddenly, desperately, he needed a wife. Why the urgency? Why marry a girl he barely knew? Unless Lady Pemberton was right. Unless it was all theater, all performance, designed to show Miranda what she'd lost. And if that were true, then Eliza wasn't just a purchased bride. She was a prop in someone else's love story. The rage that rose in her then was cleaner and sharper than anything she'd felt before. Not the confused hurt of the past weeks, not the resigned despair, just pure, crystalline anger. She would not be used this way. She would not be a pawn. She turned and walked with deliberate steps to Sebastian's study. Didn't knock, just opened the door and stepped inside. He looked up from his desk, startled. "Eliza, were you engaged to Miranda Vale?" He went very still. "Who told you? Everyone knows, apparently. Everyone but me." She crossed her arms. "Were you?" A long pause, then, "Yes." "And she left you for a richer man." "That's an oversimplification, but essentially, yes. And you never told me this because it was in the past. because it had nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us? Eliza's voice rose. You married me weeks after she returned to London. You disappeared to Dover while she was in Dover. You look at her like she's the only real thing in a room full of ghosts. And you think that has nothing to do with us? Sebastian stood, his own temper flaring. You're listening to gossip. I'm listening to my own eyes. I saw you with her, Sebastian. I saw what she is to you. She's nothing to me. Then why did you marry me? Tell me the truth. Why the sudden urgency? Why a girl you barely knew? Because I needed a wife, I know. But why then? Why that moment? She moved closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Was it to make her jealous? To prove you'd moved on? No. You're lying. Again. I'm not. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration cracking his usual control. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. I can't. Can't or won't. Eliza, please. No. No more deflection, no more half-truths. If I'm going to be paraded around London as your devoted wife, if I'm going to smile and lie and play this role, I deserve to know what I'm really part of. Her hands were shaking again, but her voice stayed steady. Tell me the truth or I walk out of this house and never come back. It was an empty threat. She had nowhere to go, no money of her own, but something in her face must have convinced him she meant it. Sebastian sank back into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. My father, he said quietly, left conditions in his will. Eliza waited. I inherited the title, the estates, the fortune, all of it. But there was a stipulation. I had to marry within 5 years of his death and produce an heir, or everything would pass to my cousin Nathaniel. He met her eyes. 5 years ended in December. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. You had 3 months, Eliza whispered. Yes. So you found the most desperate, most convenient option you could, a girl who'd marry quickly and ask few questions. I found someone suitable. You found someone purchasable. The word tasted like poison. And Miranda's return just before your deadline was, what, coincidence? She wrote to me, Sebastian admitted, said she'd made a mistake, said she wanted to try again. The knife twisted deeper. When did she write? September, a month before their wedding. So she came back for you, wanted you back, and you, what? Decided to show her you'd moved on by marrying the first available girl. No, I decided, he stopped, jaw working. I decided that what we had was over, that I couldn't trust her, couldn't forgive her, that I needed to fulfill my father's conditions with someone who understood the practical nature of the arrangement. Someone who wouldn't expect love because she was being bought. Someone who wouldn't complicate things with emotions I couldn't return. The honesty of it was almost worse than the lie. Eliza stood there looking at this man she'd married, handsome, powerful, and utterly emotionally bankrupt. You're a coward, she said softly. His head snapped up. Excuse me? You're a coward. You loved her, she hurt you, and instead of dealing with that pain, you buried it, locked it away. Convinced yourself that cold practicality was somehow more honest than feeling anything at all. She moved to the door. And then you married a girl young enough and desperate enough that she wouldn't challenge that comfortable numbness. But I'm here now, Sebastian. I'm real, and I'm not going away. I never asked you to... No, you just asked me to disappear into the wallpaper, to be seen and not heard, to produce an heir and demand nothing. Well, I'm done with that. She yanked open the door. You want a business arrangement? Fine, but business goes both ways. And right now, you owe me honesty. All of it. Eliza. She slammed the door before he could finish. The whispers started that afternoon. Eliza heard them when she ventured to the conservatory, servants whispering to each other, conversations dying when she approached. Something had happened, some new piece of gossip. By tea time, she knew what it was. A note arrived, delivered by Lady Winter's footman. Inside, in elegant script, My dear Duchess, I thought you should know what's being said before it reaches your ears as cruel rumor. Lady Miranda Vale has been telling everyone at Mrs. Hartwick's salon that the Duke married you under duress, that he proposed to her first, that she refused, and that he settled for you out of desperation and duty. She claims he still visits her, that your marriage is a sham, that you're nothing but a naive child who doesn't understand the ways of the world. I tell you this as a friend, so you might defend yourself. The whole of London will know by tomorrow." Eliza read it twice, the words swimming before her eyes. Miranda was spreading lies, vicious, calculated lies designed to humiliate her, to paint her as a fool, to destroy what little credibility she'd built. And the worst part was that some of it was true. Sebastian had loved Miranda. Did still, probably. The marriage was practical, not romantic. And Eliza was young, naive, and utterly out of her depth. But she wasn't helpless. She stood, smoothing her skirts, and went to find Mrs. Dorset. "I need to send invitations," she said. "I'm hosting a salon. Tomorrow afternoon, every significant lady in London is to be invited." Mrs. Dorset blinked. "Your Grace, that's very short notice. I don't care. Send the invitations now. Tell them the Duchess of Ashcroft requests their presence for tea and conversation. Make it impossible to refuse." "But, Your Grace, the Duke is away." He'd left that morning for some business meeting, disappearing again rather than face the aftermath of their argument. "The Duke need not be informed," Eliza said coldly. "This is my decision. If Miranda wanted to spread lies, wanted to humiliate her publicly, fine. But Eliza wouldn't hide, wouldn't cower. She'd face it head on." Dean. The invitations went out that evening. By morning, the acceptances came flooding back. Because of course they did. No one would miss the drama of the young Duchess hosting her first salon in the midst of a brewing scandal. Eliza spent the morning preparing with fierce determination. She chose her dress carefully, deep forest green, elegant but not ostentatious. She had cook prepare the finest refreshments. She arranged the drawing room to perfection, and she waited. They arrived promptly at 2, a parade of London's most influential women, all dressed in their finest, all glittering with curiosity and barely concealed malice. Lady Pemberton, Lady Winters, Mrs. Hartwick, the Duchess of Somerset, Lady Thornbury and her venomous daughter. And because the universe had a cruel sense of humor, Miranda Vale. She swept in wearing black and crimson, looking like a queen at a funeral, her amber eyes finding Eliza immediately. She smiled, sharp and knowing. "Your Grace," she said, offering a perfect curtsy. "How kind of you to invite me." "I invited everyone," Eliza replied evenly. "Shall we begin?" They settled into the drawing room like birds of prey, accepting tea and cakes, making polite conversation that barely masked the anticipation. They were waiting for blood. Eliza stood, the teacup trembling only slightly in her hand. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice clear. "I know there's been considerable talk about my marriage, about the Duke, about various matters. I thought it best to address these concerns directly." The room went silent. "There have been suggestions," she continued, "that my marriage is a matter of convenience rather than affection, that the Duke married me out of duty, not choice, that I'm naive, uninformed, and unsuitable for my position." Lady Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hartwick suddenly found her teacup fascinating. "I won't lie to you," Eliza said, and the honesty in her voice seemed to catch them off guard. "My marriage began as many do in our world, as an arrangement. My family needed help. The Duke needed a wife. We made a practical decision." Miranda's smile grew wider, triumphant. "But," Eliza continued, her voice strengthening, "that doesn't make it less valid. That doesn't make me less his wife. And it certainly doesn't give anyone license to spread vicious lies about either of us." "Lies?" Miranda's voice cut across the room like a whip. "Is it a lie that Sebastian came to me first? That he begged me to reconsider, to give him another chance?" Eliza's heart stuttered, but she kept her face calm. "I have no knowledge of my husband's private conversations before our marriage." "No, you wouldn't." Miranda stood, all pretense of civility dropping. "You were too busy being grateful for his charity to ask questions, too desperate to care why he might choose a nobody from a disgraced family." Gasps rippled through the room. "Lady Vale," Lady Pemberton said weakly, "this is hardly appropriate? True?" Miranda laughed. "The girl deserves to know what she's stepped into. Sebastian married her to fulfill his father's ridiculous will and to spite me. Nothing more. She's a placeholder, a broodmare, and the entire ton knows it. The room erupted. Women talking over each other, some defending Eliza, some clearly agreeing with Miranda, all of them hungry for the confrontation. Eliza stood frozen, the words hitting like stones, each one bruising deeper. Placeholder, broodmare, nobody. That's enough. The voice came from the doorway, cold and commanding. Everyone turned. Sebastian stood there, still in his traveling clothes, his face pale with fury. "Your Grace," Miranda said, recovering first, "we weren't expecting the—" Clearly, he moved into the room, his eyes on Miranda. "You will apologize to my wife immediately. For speaking the truth? For maligning her character publicly and spreading malicious falsehoods about our marriage." "They're not falsehoods, Sebastian, and you know it." Miranda's voice turned pleading. "Tell her. Tell everyone. You came to me. You said you still—" "I said I couldn't forgive you." Sebastian cut her off, his voice like ice. "I said that what we had was dead, and you'd killed it when you chose money over—" He stopped, visibly composing himself. "What I said to you in private has no bearing on my marriage." "Your marriage is a farce." "My marriage is my business." His voice cracked like thunder. "And you have no right, no claim, to comment on it." Miranda's face crumpled, genuine pain flashing across her features. "I made a mistake, Sebastian. One mistake. I loved you. You loved the idea of being a duchess. When a better offer came along, you took it without a second thought. And now that Lord Vale is dead and you're alone, you've decided to try to reclaim what you threw away." He moved to stand beside Eliza, close but not touching. "But I'm not available for reclamation. I have a wife, and I won't allow you or anyone else to disrespect her." The silence in the room was absolute. Miranda stared at him, tears gathering in her eyes. Then her gaze shifted to Eliza, and the hatred there was so pure, so venomous, it took Eliza's breath away. "You think you've won," she said softly. "But you're living in a house with a man who will never love you, who married you because he had no choice, who thinks of me every time he looks at you and sees everything he lost." She smiled through her tears. "Enjoy your victory, Your Grace. I hope it keeps you warm at night." She swept from the room, leaving devastation in her wake. The other women sat frozen, unsure whether to stay or flee. Sebastian turned to them, his voice formal but final. "I believe this gathering is concluded. Thank you for attending." They scrambled up, offering hasty curtsies, fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Within minutes, Eliza and Sebastian stood alone in the drawing room, surrounded by abandoned teacups and the wreckage of her first, and probably last, salon. "I'm sorry," Sebastian said quietly. "I should have told you about Miranda, should have explained—" "Do you still love her?" The question hung between them, stark and unavoidable. Sebastian met her eyes, and for a long moment he didn't answer. That silence told Eliza everything she needed to know. "I see," she whispered. "Eliza—" "No." She held up a hand. "You defended me. In front of everyone. You stood by me. That's more than I expected." Her voice cracked. "But I can't do this anymore, this pretending, this performance." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want out. I want to end this marriage." His face went white. "You can't. Divorce is—" "Impossible, I know. Scandalous. Ruinous." She laughed, the sound brittle. "But staying in a marriage where I'm nothing but a substitute for the woman you actually wanted? That's its own kind of ruin." "I don't want—" He stopped, struggling for words. "I don't want Miranda." "But you don't want me either. Not really." "That's not true." "Then what do you want, Sebastian?" Eliza demanded, all her carefully maintained composure finally shattering. "Because I'm drowning here. I'm drowning in this house, in this role, in this marriage to a man who can barely stand to look at me. Tell me what you want." "I want—" He seemed to be fighting some internal battle, his face a mask of conflict. "I want to stop feeling like everything I touch turns to stone. I want to stop being so afraid of feeling anything that I've locked myself away from everyone. I want—" A loud knock interrupted him. The drawing room door burst open. Mrs. Dorset stood there, her usual composure completely shattered.
"Your Grace," she gasped. "There's been... a messenger just arrived." "What is it?" Sebastian demanded. "It's all over London, sir. Someone started a rumor. They're saying..." She looked at Eliza, genuine distress on her face. "They're saying the Duchess has been unfaithful, that she's been carrying on with Lord Hartley, that the marriage is a sham because she's already pregnant with another man's child." The room spun. Eliza had met Lord Hartley exactly once at a dinner party, had exchanged perhaps 10 words with him. "That's insane," Sebastian said. "Who started..." "The rumor came from Lady Vale," Mrs. Dorset said quietly. "She's telling everyone. By morning, the entire ton will believe it. They're saying..." She hesitated. "They're saying the Duchess should be brought before the social court, that she should be ruined." Eliza's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, the world narrowing to a pinpoint.
The social court, an informal but devastatingly effective gathering where London's elite decided who deserved to remain in society and who should be cast out. It wasn't legal, had no official power, but its verdicts were absolute. Women brought before it rarely recovered. Guilty or innocent, the stain remained, and Miranda had just condemned her to it. "No," Sebastian said flatly. "That's not happening. Your Grace, if the court convenes and the Duchess doesn't attend, they'll assume guilt. She'll be ruined either way. Then we fight it." He turned to Eliza, his eyes fierce. "We'll go. We'll face them. And we'll destroy this lie." "How?" Eliza heard herself say. "Everyone already believes I'm nothing. Miranda's given them the perfect story. The desperate girl who married above her station and couldn't even manage basic fidelity." She laughed bitterly. "It doesn't matter that it's not true. It's what they want to believe. I won't let them destroy you. You can't stop them." "No one can." She met his eyes. "This is what you married me for, isn't it? To be respectable, to represent your family name. And now I'm the opposite. I'm scandal. I'm ruin. That's not..." "When is the court convening?" Mrs. Dorset swallowed. "Tomorrow night, Your Grace. At the Pemberton estate. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prepare for her own destruction." Eliza stood, her legs somehow steady despite everything. "Then I suppose I should rest. I'll want to look my best when they tear me apart." "Eliza." "Please leave me alone, Sebastian. You've done enough." She walked from the room with her head high, her spine straight, every inch the Duchess they'd tried to make her. But as soon as she reached her chambers and closed the door, she collapsed. The sobs came hard and violent, tearing from her chest like they'd been caged there for weeks. She pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sound, but she couldn't stop them. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with divorce or escape, but with total annihilation. Her reputation destroyed, her name ruined, her brief tenure as Duchess of Ashcroft becoming nothing but a cautionary tale whispered at parties for years to come. The desperate girl who thought she could marry a duke, the fool who thought she could survive London society, the wife whose own husband couldn't love her enough to protect her from the woman he actually wanted. Eliza cried until she had no tears left, until her throat was raw and her head pounded and the darkness outside her window was complete. Then she stood, washed her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. The Duchess of Ashcroft looked back, red-eyed, pale, terrified, but not defeated. Not yet. If Miranda wanted to destroy her, wanted to drag her before the court and watch her burn, fine. Eliza would face it, would walk into that room of vipers with her head high. And if she was going to fall, she'd make damn sure she took Miranda down with her. She had 24 hours to find a way. In his study, Sebastian sat at his desk, staring at nothing. Tomorrow night, they'd try to destroy his wife. His young, brave, utterly undeserving wife, who he'd trapped in a marriage she'd never wanted, with a man too damaged to give her what she needed, and he couldn't protect her. Because the truth Miranda had spoken, the one that cut deepest, was that Eliza was right. He had loved Miranda. Part of him still did, in the way you love a scar, not with affection, but with the permanent acknowledgement that it changed you. But looking at Eliza tonight, watching her face the entire room with courage he couldn't fathom, seeing her stand alone against the worst society could throw at her, he'd felt something shift, something terrifying and real. Tomorrow, the court would convene. Tomorrow, they'd try to judge her, condemn her, ruin her, and Sebastian would have to make a choice. Stand by his wife truly and completely, burning every bridge to his past, or let her fall and live the rest of his life knowing he'd destroyed the one person who'd ever demanded he be better than his worst self. He closed his eyes and prayed he'd find the courage to deserve her. The night pressed against the windows of Eliza's chambers, dark and heavy with unspoken dread. She sat at her writing desk, a single candle burning, her mind racing through possibilities like a trapped animal searching for escape. 24 hours. She had 24 hours to find proof of her innocence, to unmask Miranda's lies, to salvage something from the wreckage of her reputation. But proof of what? That she'd never been alone with Lord Hartley? That she wasn't carrying anyone's child? How did one prove a negative? How did one defend against whispers and insinuations that fed on doubt rather than fact? The social court didn't require evidence. It required spectacle, blood. And tomorrow night, they intended to have hers. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting her maid. Instead, Sebastian entered, still in his shirt sleeves, his cravat loosened. He looked as exhausted as she felt. "I didn't expect to see you," Eliza said quietly. "I couldn't sleep." He moved to the window, staring out at the dark gardens. "I keep thinking about tomorrow, about what they'll say to you, what they'll try to make you into. A cautionary tale, a scandal, a reminder that girls like me don't belong in places like this. You belong here more than any of them." He turned to face her, and something in his expression was different, raw, unguarded. "Eliza, I need to tell you something. About Miranda, about why I married you." "Sebastian, please, No, you need to hear this. You deserve to hear this." He crossed to her, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. "When Miranda wrote to me in September, saying she'd made a mistake, saying she wanted me back, I was furious. Not because I still loved her, but because I realized I'd spent 5 years making myself into stone, telling myself that was strength, that not feeling was somehow more honest than being vulnerable." Eliza's breath caught. "I married you because my father's will required it, yes. But I chose you specifically because you were young enough to mold, desperate enough not to question, quiet enough not to disturb the comfortable numbness I'd built around myself." His voice roughened. "I chose you because I thought you'd be safe, easy, forgettable." The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like confession. "But you're not," he continued. "You're not safe or easy or forgettable. You're brave and honest, and you demand better from me than I've ever demanded from myself. And watching you prepare to face that court tomorrow, knowing I put you in this position..." He stopped, his jaw working. "I'm terrified I won't be able to protect you." "You can't protect me," Eliza said softly. "No one can. The court has already decided I'm guilty. Tomorrow is just theater." "Then we'll give them better theater." His eyes sharpened with something like determination. "We'll fight together, and we'll make them see the truth." "What truth? That I'm innocent?" "They don't care about innocence. That Miranda is lying. That she's orchestrated this entire thing out of jealousy and spite. That she's the one who should be standing trial, not you." "How do we prove that?" "I don't know yet, but we have until tomorrow night to find out." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Will you trust me? Just this once?" Eliza looked at their joined hands, feeling the weight of the emerald ring on her finger, the ring that had belonged to his grandmother, that had sealed their bargain. "I want to," she whispered. "But you have to stop protecting Miranda." "I'm not..." "You are. Even now. You won't fully condemn her because part of you still..." The words stuck in her throat. "Still what? Loves her?" Sebastian's laugh was bitter. "I don't love Miranda. I haven't for years. But I'm ashamed of what I let her turn me into. The cold, closed-off man who married a girl barely out of the schoolroom because she seemed like she wouldn't require actual emotional participation." He squeezed her hand. "That shame isn't love. It's regret. And I'm done letting it control me." The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows on the walls. "Then help me fight," Eliza said. "Not just tomorrow. Now. Tonight. Help me find a way to survive this." Something shifted in Sebastian's expression, resolve crystallizing into action. "Get dressed," he said abruptly. "Something practical. We're going out." "Out? Sebastian, it's past midnight." "Exactly. Which means certain people will be where we need them to be." He was already moving toward the door. "Dress warmly. We may be out for a while." "Where are we going?" He paused in the doorway, a grim smile touching his lips. "To find the truth, and to remind London society that the Duke of Ashcroft protects what's his." 20 minutes later, Eliza found herself in a closed carriage rattling through London's dark streets, dressed in a simple gray gown with a heavy cloak, Sebastian beside her, with a pistol tucked discreetly in his coat. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" she asked, as they turned onto a narrow lane she didn't recognize. "Covent Garden. There's a gentleman's club there, the Raven's Rest. It's where men go when they want privacy for conversations they don't want overheard." "And you think Lord Hartley will be there?" "I know he will be. He's there every Thursday night, playing cards until dawn." Sebastian's jaw was tight. If Miranda's going to use him in her lie, he must have agreed to it, or at least not contradicted it. "I want to know why." The carriage stopped in front of a nondescript building with blackened windows and a single gas lamp by the door. Sebastian helped Eliza down, then spoke quietly to the driver. "Wait here. If we're not back in an hour, go to Inspector Morrison at Scotland Yard. Tell him everything." The driver's eyes widened, but he nodded. Sebastian took Eliza's arm and guided her to the door. A large man appeared from the shadows. Security, clearly. "Members only, Your Grace," he said, recognizing Sebastian but blocking their path. "I'm here to see Lord Hartley." "It's urgent." "Lord Hartley's at the tables, sir. He doesn't like to be disturbed." Sebastian produced a gold sovereign and pressed it into the man's palm. "Make an exception." The man hesitated, then pocketed the coin and stepped aside. Inside, the club was smoke-filled and dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of cigars and whiskey. Men hunched over card tables, their voices low and conspiratorial. A few looked up as Sebastian and Eliza passed, surprise registering at the sight of a woman in such a place. They found Lord Hartley in a back room, cards spread before him, a glass of port at his elbow. He was perhaps 40, heavy-set, with thinning hair, and the florid complexion of someone who drank more than was wise. He looked up as Sebastian approached, and his face went pale. "Your Grace," he stammered, half rising. "I didn't expect... This is highly irregular. So is spreading lies about my wife." Sebastian's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "I believe you and I need to have a conversation." Hartley's eyes darted to Eliza, then back to Sebastian. "I don't know what your... Lady Vale has been telling all of London that my wife has been carrying on an affair with you, that she's pregnant with your child. I'm here to ask you why you haven't publicly denied these claims." The other men at the table had gone silent, watching with avid interest. Hartley's face reddened further. "Your Grace, I would never. The Duchess and I have barely spoken. Then why haven't you said so?" Hartley glanced around nervously. "I didn't want to get involved. These society matters. They're not... I thought if I stayed quiet, it would blow over." "It won't blow over. Tomorrow night, my wife faces the social court. They'll use your silence as confirmation of guilt." Sebastian leaned closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "So you're going to tell me right now, Lord Hartley, did anything improper occur between you and the Duchess?" "No, absolutely not." "Have you ever been alone with her?" "Never. We met once at a dinner party, exchanged pleasantries about the weather. That was the extent of it." "Then you'll testify to that tomorrow, at the court." Hartley's eyes widened in panic. "Your Grace, I can't. If I get involved, if I stand up in front of everyone. Lady Vale said she'd..." He stopped abruptly, realizing he'd said too much. Sebastian's eyes sharpened. "Lady Vale said what?" "Nothing. I misspoke." "Lord Hartley." Sebastian's voice was silk over steel. "What did Lady Vale threaten you with?" A long silence. Then Hartley slumped in his chair, defeated. "She said if I denied the rumors, she'd tell my wife about the debts, about the gambling. I'm in deep, Your Grace. Thousands of pounds. If my wife finds out, she'll leave me, take the children, ruin me socially." He looked up, desperation in his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt the Duchess. I'm not part of this. But I can't lose everything." Eliza felt cold fury wash through her. Miranda hadn't just lied, she'd orchestrated it, found a vulnerable man, threatened him, used him as a pawn in her vendetta. "How much do you owe?" Sebastian asked quietly. £15,000, a staggering sum. Sebastian pulled out his checkbook, wrote quickly, and tore off the check. "This covers your debt, all of it. In exchange, you will appear tomorrow night and tell the truth, every word of it. You'll explain that Lady Vale threatened you, that she manufactured this entire scandal." Hartley stared at the check like it was a hallucination. "Your Grace, I can't. This is too much. You can and you will. Because the alternative is that I go to your wife myself and tell her everything. The debts, the clubs, the women I'm quite certain you haven't mentioned." Sebastian's smile was sharp. "Do we have an understanding?" Hartley took the check with shaking hands. "Yes, Your Grace." "I'll be there. I'll tell them everything." "Good. Be at the Pemberton estate at 8 o'clock. Don't be late." They left him there, clutching his salvation, and made their way back through the club. Outside, the night air was crisp and clean after the smoke-choked interior. "That was incredible," Eliza breathed as they climbed back into the carriage. You bought his testimony." "I bought his honesty," Sebastian corrected. "What he'll say tomorrow is the truth. I just removed the leverage Miranda had over him." He settled beside her as the carriage lurched into motion. "But it's not enough. Hartley's testimony proves the affair never happened, but it doesn't explain why Miranda targeted you. We need more." "What more is there? She wanted you back. I was in her way. She decided to destroy me." "It's not that simple. Miranda is calculating. She wouldn't risk her own reputation on such a transparent vendetta unless she had something to gain beyond simple revenge." His eyes were distant, thinking, "There has to be more." The carriage rattled through the empty streets, heading back toward Mayfair. Eliza's mind raced, turning over everything she knew about Miranda. Widow, wealthy, beautiful, invited to all the best parties despite the scandal of her past. Why would she care so much about Sebastian remarrying unless— "The will," Eliza said suddenly. Sebastian looked at her sharply. "What?" "Your father's will, the conditions. What happens if you don't produce an heir?" "Everything goes to my cousin Nathaniel. I told you that." "And if I'm ruined, if this scandal makes it impossible for me to function as your Duchess, you can't produce a legitimate heir. Not with me." Eliza's thoughts crystallized. "Sebastian, who is Nathaniel? What's his situation?" "He's my cousin on my mother's side, second in line for the title, currently living in Bath with his mother." Sebastian frowned. "Why does that—" His face went white. "Oh, hell." "What?" "Nathaniel's mother, my Aunt Catherine." His voice was strained. "She remarried 5 years ago, after her first husband died." "To whom?" "Lord Edmund Vale, Miranda's late husband's older brother." The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. "Miranda is related to your heir," Eliza whispered. "By marriage. If I fail to produce an heir, if you're ruined and we separate, if I die without issue, Nathaniel inherits, and his stepmother is Miranda's sister-in-law." Sebastian's hands clenched into fists. "She's not trying to win me back. She's trying to ensure the Ashcroft fortune stays in her family's orbit." "But that's insane. You're young and healthy. You could remarry, have heirs with someone else. Not if my reputation is also destroyed. Not if society believes I'm a fool who couldn't control his wife, who allowed himself to be cuckolded by the first fortune hunter who came along." His eyes were hard. "She's not just trying to ruin you, Eliza. She's trying to ruin both of us. To make sure the Ashcroft name is so tainted that even if I do remarry, no respectable woman would have me. No legitimate heir would be possible. That's diabolical. That's Miranda." Sebastian pulled off his glove, rubbed his face. "She always did think 3 moves ahead. When she married Lord Vale, everyone thought she'd chosen money over love. But Vale was already dying. She knew she'd be a wealthy widow within a few years. And then she positioned herself perfectly, connected to my heir's family, maintained friendships with all the right people, waited for the perfect moment to strike." "But why now? Why wait 5 years?" "Because 5 years ago, she thought I'd never marry. Thought I'd die alone and bitter, and she'd still end up with influence over the Ashcroft fortune through Nathaniel." His jaw tightened. But then my father's will forced my hand, and when you became my wife, you became the one thing standing between her and everything she'd planned for." Eliza sat back against the cushions, her mind reeling. This wasn't about jealousy or lost love. This was about money, power, calculated destruction. "We need proof," she said. "Hartley's testimony proves the affair is a lie, but it doesn't prove Miranda's motives. If we go to the court tomorrow with just his word against hers, she'll spin it as him being paid off or threatened. We need something concrete." "Letters," Sebastian said suddenly. "If she's been coordinating with Nathaniel or his mother, there would be letters. Communications about the inheritance, about strategy." He met Eliza's eyes. "I need to get into her house." "That's breaking and entering. That's retrieving evidence of conspiracy. It's also illegal and dangerous, and if you're caught, then I'm caught. But I won't let her destroy you without a fight." His voice was fierce. "You asked me to help you fight. This is me fighting." The carriage pulled up in front of Ashcroft House. Sebastian handed Eliza down, then spoke to the driver again. "Take me to Lady Vale's residence in Belgravia." "Sebastian, no." Eliza grabbed his arm. "You can't do this alone. If something happens, nothing will happen. I'll be in and out within an hour." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "Why? Because I'm a woman? Because I'm your delicate duchess who needs protecting?" She lifted her chin. "She's trying to destroy me, Sebastian. My reputation, my life, my future. If there's evidence in that house, I have as much right to find it as you do." He stared at her, clearly torn between protection and pragmatism. "Please," Eliza said quietly, "let me help save myself." Something in his expression softened. "You're terrifyingly brave, you know that?" "I'm terrified, but I'm done being a victim." Sebastian nodded slowly, then helped her back into the carriage. "Fine. But you do exactly as I say. Understand? No arguments, no heroics. We get in, find the letters, and get out." "Agreed." As the carriage rattled toward Belgravia, Eliza felt her heart hammering against her ribs. They were about to break into a noblewoman's home in the middle of the night, searching for evidence to prevent a scandal that could destroy them both. It was madness. It was also the first time since her wedding that she felt truly alive. Lady Vale's townhouse was dark when they arrived, only a single light burning in what appeared to be a servant's room on the top floor. The rest of the grand facade was shadowed and silent. Sebastian and Eliza approached from the mews behind the house, keeping to the shadows. Sebastian had changed into dark clothes, his face grim with determination. "The study will be on the ground floor," he whispered. "That's where she'd keep correspondence. We go in through the garden entrance. The lock is old, easy to pick." "You know how to pick locks?" "I had a misspent youth." A ghost of a smile. "Ready?" Eliza nodded. They slipped through the garden gate, past manicured hedges and dormant flower beds. The garden door was exactly where Sebastian said it would be, a servant's entrance, meant for deliveries. He worked the lock with a small metal tool, his movements quick and practiced. Within seconds, the door clicked open. Inside, the house was tomb quiet. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. They moved through a hallway lined with portraits, past rooms filled with furniture draped in white cloth. "She's away," Sebastian murmured. "Probably at her club or visiting friends. We have time." The study was at the front of the house, a small, elegant room with a mahogany desk and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Sebastian went straight to the desk, trying drawers. "Locked," he muttered, then produced his pick again. While he worked, Eliza scanned the bookshelves. Most were filled with novels and histories, but one shelf held leather-bound journals and boxes of correspondence. She pulled down a box labeled with the current year and opened it. Inside were dozens of letters, organized by date. She flipped through them quickly, invitations, bills, social correspondence. Nothing useful. Then, near the bottom, a letter with familiar handwriting. Her breath caught. "Sebastian." He looked up from the desk. "What is it?" She handed him the letter. "It's from Nathaniel." Sebastian unfolded it, reading quickly. His face darkened. "Listen to this," he said, his voice tight. "Dearest Aunt Miranda, Mother and I are most encouraged by your plan. If you can indeed create sufficient scandal around the Duke's marriage, we agree that divorce or separation becomes inevitable. And as you say, a man of his pride will never remarry after such humiliation. The entail will pass to me within the decade, and we shall all benefit from the arrangement as discussed." Sebastian looked up, fury in his eyes. "It's dated 3 weeks before our wedding. They've been planning this since the beginning." "There's more," Eliza said, pulling out another letter. "This one's from Miranda to someone named Margaret. Nathaniel's mother. My aunt." Eliza read aloud. "The Whitmore girl is perfect for our purposes. Young, desperate, with no social connections strong enough to protect her. Once she's ruined, Sebastian will be so humiliated he'll retreat completely from society. He'll die alone and bitter, and Nathaniel will have everything. I confess, there's a certain poetry in using Sebastian's own sense of duty against him. The cruelty of it was breathtaking." "She planned this entire thing," Eliza whispered, "from the beginning. She knew exactly how to manipulate you, manipulate me, manipulate everyone." Sebastian was going through the desk drawers now, pulling out more letters, more evidence. "She's documented everything. The bribes to spread rumors, the threats to Lord Hartley, even her conversations with Lady Pemberton and the others about how to turn society against you." He laughed, the sound bitter. "She's so confident she'll win. She kept records like it's a business transaction." "Then we have her." Eliza felt something fierce and bright bloom in her chest. "We have everything we need. We take all of this to the court tomorrow. We show them exactly what Miranda is, what she's done." Sebastian began gathering the letters, stuffing them into his coat. "This isn't just evidence of her lies about you. It's proof of conspiracy, fraud, attempted theft of inheritance. She'll be ruined, completely and utterly ruined." A floorboard creaked behind them. They both froze. "How touching," Miranda's voice cut through the darkness. "Breaking into my home, stealing my private correspondence. I do hope you're prepared to explain this to the magistrate." She stood in the doorway, still in her evening gown, a small pistol in her hand. Behind her, 2 men, footmen or hired muscle. It was hard to tell. "Miranda," Sebastian said carefully, "put the gun down." "I don't think so. You're trespassing, thieving. I'm well within my rights to defend my property." Her smile was cold. "Drop the letters, Sebastian." "No." "Drop them, or I shoot your young bride. And I'm a very good shot. My late husband insisted I learn." She cocked the pistol. "Drop them now." Sebastian's jaw clenched. Slowly, he set the letters on the desk. "Good. Now step away." They stepped back, hands raised. Miranda moved forward, gesturing to the footmen. "Gather those. All of them. Take them to the fireplace upstairs and burn them. Every single one." "Miranda, this is insane," Sebastian said. "We know everything. The conspiracy, the plan with Nathaniel, all of it. Even if you destroy these letters, we can still testify. Your word against mine? Please. I'm a respected widow. You're a desperate duke trying to save his unsuitable wife from well-deserved scandal." She laughed. "No one will believe you. They'll think you've gone mad with humiliation." "Lord Hartley will testify tomorrow." "Lord Hartley will say whatever I tell him to say, or his wife learns about his mistress in Cheapside. I have leverage over half of London, Sebastian. Did you really think you could outmaneuver me?" The footmen were gathering the letters. In seconds, they'd all be gone. All the evidence, all the proof. Eliza's hand found Sebastian's in the darkness. She squeezed once. Then she lunged forward, not at Miranda, but at the desk. Her fingers closed around the letter from Nathaniel, the most damning one, the smoking gun, and she shoved it down the front of her dress. "Stop her!" Miranda shrieked. One of the footmen grabbed Eliza, but she twisted away, kicking hard. Her foot connected with his knee, and he went down cursing. Sebastian moved simultaneously, tackling the second footman. They went down in a tangle of limbs, fists flying. Miranda's pistol swung wildly between them. "Stop! Stop right now, or I'll—" A new voice cut through the chaos. "Or you'll what, exactly?" Everyone froze. Inspector Morrison stood in the doorway, 3 constables behind him. His gray eyes swept the scene with professional detachment. "Your Grace," he said to Sebastian, "your driver was quite insistent I accompany him here. Good thing, too. Appears we've arrived just in time to prevent—" He looked at Miranda. "Well, quite a few crimes, by the look of it." Miranda's face went white. Inspector, these people broke into my home. Yes, I gathered that. You can file a complaint, of course, right after we discuss why you're holding them at gunpoint and ordering your servants to destroy evidence. He nodded to his constables. Secure the letters. And the lady's weapon, if you please. One of the constables carefully relieved Miranda of the pistol. Another gathered the scattered letters from where the footmen had dropped them. This is outrageous, Miranda said, but her voice had lost its power. I'm a lady. You can't. I can, actually. Particularly when there's credible evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Morrison's gaze was steady. Though I imagine the social court tomorrow will be far more interested in the contents of these letters than any magistrate. The fight went out of Miranda all at once. She sagged against the doorframe, suddenly looking older, smaller. It was supposed to work, she whispered. It was all supposed to work. It might have, Sebastian said coldly, if you hadn't underestimated my wife. Eliza pulled the crumpled letter from her bodice and handed it to Inspector Morrison. You'll want to read this one first. Morrison scanned it quickly, his eyebrows rising. Conspiracy to defraud an inheritance. That's quite serious, Lady Vale. I want my solicitor. Of course, you're entitled to representation. He gestured to his constables. Escort Lady Vale to the station. We'll take formal statements there. As they led Miranda away, she looked back at Eliza one last time. The hatred was still there, but so was something else. Fear. You've won, she said quietly. Enjoy it while it lasts. Women like you never stay on top for long. Women like me survive, Eliza replied. That's more than I can say for you. Miranda was taken out, still protesting, still trying to maintain some dignity, even as everything crumbled around her. Inspector Morrison turned to Sebastian and Eliza. You'll need to give statements as well, and I strongly recommend you engage a barrister before the social court tomorrow. These letters will cause quite a stir. We'll be there, Sebastian said. And thank you, Inspector. Thank your driver. He was quite persuasive about potential danger. Morrison tipped his hat. Your Graces. He left with his men, taking the letters as evidence, leaving Sebastian and Eliza alone in the wrecked study. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Sebastian started to laugh. A real laugh, rough with relief and residual adrenaline. You kicked a footman, he said incredulously. You kicked a footman and stole evidence down your dress. I had to improvise. Eliza was shaking, the fear finally catching up with her now that the danger had passed. I thought, when she pulled the gun, I thought, I know. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. You were magnificent, absolutely terrifying and magnificent. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in his scent, feeling his heart pound against hers. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it. You refused to give up, refused to be a victim. You saved us both. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, the wreckage of Miranda's schemes surrounding them. Tomorrow, they'd face the social court. Tomorrow, they'd present the evidence and watch London society's opinion shift. But tonight, in this moment, they'd already won. The Pemberton estate blazed with light the following evening. Every window glowed, every corridor filled with voices. The social court was convening, and it seemed all of London had turned out to watch. Eliza entered on Sebastian's arm, wearing midnight blue silk and the Ashcroft emeralds. Her head was high, her spine straight. Behind them walked Lord Hartley, pale but determined, and Inspector Morrison carrying a leather case full of evidence. The great hall fell silent as they entered. Lady Pemberton stood at the front of the room, flanked by the other matriarchs who constituted the informal judges of the court. Their faces were severe, anticipatory. Your Graces, Lady Pemberton began, we are gathered to address serious allegations against the Duchess of Ashcroft, specifically claims of infidelity and— The allegations are false, Sebastian's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Manufactured by Lady Miranda Vale as part of a conspiracy to defraud my inheritance and destroy both my wife and my reputation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. That's quite an accusation, Lady Pemberton said carefully. It's quite provable. Sebastian gestured to Inspector Morrison. The inspector has evidence, letters written by Lady Vale and her co-conspirators detailing the entire scheme. Morrison stepped forward, opening his case.
If I may address the assembly, for the next 20 minutes he read from the letters. Nathaniel's cold calculations about the inheritance, Miranda's cruel planning about how to use Eliza's youth and desperation against her, the bribes, the threats, the manipulation. The room grew quieter with each revelation. When Morrison finished, he looked directly at the assembled matriarchs. Lady Vale has been arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. Lord Nathaniel Ashcroft and his mother are also under investigation.
I believe this sufficiently addresses the question of the Duchess's character. Lady Pemberton looked shaken. And Lord Hartley? Hartley stepped forward, his voice steady despite his obvious nerves. I was threatened by Lady Vale into remaining silent about her lies. The Duchess and I have never been anything but politely acquainted. I apologize for allowing my silence to contribute to these falsehoods. Silence. Heavy and absolute. Then, from the back of the room, a single person began to clap. It was the Duchess of Somerset. She rose, her applause growing stronger, and one by one others joined her. The sound grew, filling the hall, transforming from scattered applause to something that felt like vindication. Lady Pemberton cleared her throat. I believe we can consider this matter resolved. The Duchess of Ashcroft is cleared of all accusations. And may I say, she looked directly at Eliza. Your Grace, you have shown remarkable courage in the face of unconscionable cruelty. You have my deepest apologies for ever doubting you. Others echoed her sentiments. Women who'd whispered about Eliza days before now rushed to offer support, sympathy, friendship. It was dizzying, overwhelming. Sebastian's hand tightened on hers, grounding her. They stayed for another hour, accepting congratulations, watching as the court's judgment shifted completely. By the time they left, Eliza's reputation wasn't just restored, it was enhanced. She'd become the innocent victim who'd fought back against impossible odds, the tragic young Duchess who'd proven herself worthy of her title. In the carriage home, Sebastian pulled Eliza close. You were perfect, he murmured against her hair. I was terrified. That's what made it perfect. You were terrified and you fought anyway. He tilted her face up to his. I'm in awe of you, Eliza Ashcroft. She looked into his eyes and saw something there she'd never seen before. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it. The first crack in this ice, a possibility. We make a good team, she said softly. We do. His thumb brushed her cheek. And tomorrow, when this is all over, when the scandal has died and life returns to normal, I'd like to try again, to do this marriage properly, not as a transaction, but as... He hesitated, searching for words. As partners who actually know each other. I'd like that too. The carriage pulled up to Ashcroft House. They climbed down together, walked up the steps together, entered their home together. Not strangers anymore, not quite lovers yet, but something new, something with promise. And for the first time since she'd married, Eliza felt hope bloom warm and real in her chest. The house felt different when they entered it that night, warmer somehow, despite the November chill that had settled over London. The gas lamps cast their familiar golden glow across the marble floors, but everything seemed softer, more welcoming than it had been just hours before. Mrs. Dorset met them in the foyer, her usually stern expression showing the faintest trace of relief. Your Graces, I trust the evening went well? Better than well, Mrs. Dorset. Sebastian handed her his coat and gloves. The Duchess has been completely vindicated. Lady Vale has been arrested, and the entire conspiracy has been exposed. The housekeeper's eyes widened fractionally, the most emotion Eliza had ever seen from her. I'm very glad to hear it, Your Grace. She turned to Eliza, and something in her expression shifted. If I may say, ma'am, you've shown remarkable strength through all this. The staff and I are quite proud to serve you. The word so unexpected hit Eliza harder than she'd anticipated. She felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Dorset. That means more than you know. The housekeeper nodded crisply, recovering her usual composure. Will you be wanting anything before bed? Tea, perhaps? No, thank you. We'll manage ourselves tonight. After Mrs. Dorset withdrew, Eliza and Sebastian stood in the foyer, suddenly alone and uncertain. The adrenaline of the evening was fading, leaving exhaustion and something more complicated in its wake. I should let you rest, Sebastian said quietly. It's been an impossible few days. Sebastian, Eliza caught his hand before he could turn toward the east wing. You said earlier in the carriage that you wanted to try again, to do this marriage properly. I did. I do. Then don't go to the east wing tonight. She met his eyes, her heart hammering. Stay. Talk to me. Help me understand who you are beyond the cold Duke everyone else sees. He looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable and uncertain crossing his face. Then he nodded. All right. They climbed the stairs together, and for the first time since their wedding, Sebastian followed Eliza into the west wing, into her private chambers. The room was warm, a fire burning low in the grate. Eliza dismissed her maid with a quiet word, then turned to find Sebastian standing awkwardly near the window, looking like he didn't quite know what to do with himself. Sit, she said gently, gesturing to the chairs near the fire. Please, you're making me nervous. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm making you nervous? I feel like I'm trespassing. You're my husband. You can't trespass in your own home. He sat, and she took the chair opposite, curling her legs beneath her in a way that would have scandalized any etiquette instructor. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the firelight. I don't know how to do this, Sebastian admitted finally. How to be open, vulnerable. I've spent so long building walls that I'm not sure what's left underneath them. Then tell me about before the walls, Eliza said. Tell me about the man who fell in love with Miranda Vale, the one who got hurt. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. I was 22 when I met her. Young, idealistic, certain I could make my own choices despite my father's expectations. She was beautiful and clever, and she made me feel like I mattered for more than just my title. He stared into the fire. We courted for a year. I proposed. She said yes. I thought I'd found someone who saw me, not just what I represented. What happened? Lord Vale made her a better offer. He was 60, enormously wealthy, and dying of consumption. Miranda's family was genteel but poor. Her father had squandered most of their money. Vale offered her security, a title, and a guaranteed widowhood within a few years. His voice was flat, factual. She told me she was sorry, that she cared for me but couldn't afford to marry for love, that I'd understand someday when I had responsibilities of my own. Eliza felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. That must have devastated you. It did, but the worst part was that she was right. Within a year, my father died unexpectedly, and I inherited everything, the title, the estates, the crushing weight of responsibility. And I realized that if I'd married Miranda, if I'd had a wife I actually loved, I would have been vulnerable, distracted, compromised. He looked at her. So I decided vulnerability was weakness, that the only safe way to navigate this life was to feel as little as possible. That's not living, Sebastian. That's just surviving. I know that now. Watching you face down Miranda, risk everything to defend yourself. You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not shutting yourself off from feeling. It's feeling everything and choosing to fight anyway. Eliza felt warmth bloom in her chest. I was terrified the entire time. I know. That's what made it brave. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm sorry, Eliza, for all of it. For treating you like a transaction, for leaving you alone, for not protecting you from Miranda sooner. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. We both made choices, Eliza said quietly. I married you knowing it was an arrangement. I can't blame you for honoring the terms we agreed to. But you can blame me for not trying to make it more, for not even attempting to know you. His eyes were intense in the firelight. I'd like to change that. If you'll let me. I'd like that too. But Sebastian, she hesitated, needing to say this even if it hurt. I need you to be honest with me about Miranda. Do you still love her? He didn't answer immediately, and she appreciated that. Appreciated that he was actually considering the question rather than giving her a comforting lie. I don't love who she turned out to be, he said finally. The woman who would manipulate and destroy for money and power. That's not the person I fell in love with. But do I still carry some feeling for who I thought she was? For the dream of what we could have had? He met Eliza's eyes. Maybe. In the way you carry a scar, you don't love the injury, but you can't deny it changed you. The honesty of it stung, but it was also exactly what she needed to hear.
I can accept that, Eliza said. As long as you understand that I won't compete with a ghost. I won't spend our marriage wondering if you're comparing me to her, wishing I was someone else. You're nothing like her. That's what makes you remarkable.
He stood, crossed to her chair, and knelt beside it so they were eye level. Miranda was beautiful and charming and ultimately hollow. You're brave and honest and real. You demanded I be better when it would have been easier to just accept the cold marriage I offered. You fought for yourself when no one else would. His hand found hers. I don't want Miranda. I want the chance to deserve you. Eliza felt tears slip down her cheeks. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm not very good at romance, but I'm willing to learn, if you'll be patient with me. She laughed through her tears. I think we're both learning. Neither of us knew what we were getting into when we married. No, but maybe that's not the worst thing. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Maybe we get to build something together. Something that's ours, not defined by society's expectations or our family's requirements. Just us.
I'd like that, Eliza whispered.
Sebastian leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers. It was nothing like their wedding kiss, that cold, perfunctory contact. This was warm and seeking, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, both were breathing harder. Stay tonight, Eliza said. Not for duty or airs or because it's expected. Stay because you want to. I want to, Sebastian said, his voice rough. I want to know everything about you. Your favorite books, what makes you laugh, what you dream about when you think no one's watching. That will take more than one night. Then I'll stay tomorrow night too. And the night after that. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, lighter. I'll stay until you're tired of me. That could take a very long time. I'm counting on it. Morning came soft and golden, sunlight filtering through the curtains to paint the room in shades of amber and rose. Eliza woke to find Sebastian still there, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. How long have you been awake? She murmured, still half asleep. An hour, maybe. I didn't want to wake you. You could have. I wouldn't have minded. You looked peaceful. I haven't seen you look peaceful since... He stopped. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen you look peaceful. You've been carrying so much weight. So have you. Yes, but I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be. Eliza sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. Sebastian, if we're going to make this marriage work, you need to stop treating me like porcelain. I'm stronger than you think. I know you are. You've proven that beyond any doubt. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. But that doesn't mean you should have to carry everything alone. That's what partners do, isn't it? Share the weight? I suppose it is. She leaned into his touch. This is strange. Good strange, but strange. Yesterday I wasn't sure if our marriage would survive the scandal. Today we're building something real, he finished. I know. It's terrifying. Terrifying, she agreed. But also exciting. Very exciting. His smile turned mischievous. Though I imagine society is going to have opinions about the transformation of the cold Duke of Ashcroft into a devoted husband. Let them talk. We've survived worse. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Dorset's voice came through the door, carefully neutral. Your Graces, I apologize for the interruption, but there are visitors. Lady Pemberton, the Duchess of Somerset, and several others. They're asking to call on the Duchess. Eliza and Sebastian exchanged glances. Already, Eliza said. It's barely 9 o'clock. Society moves quickly when there's a new narrative to embrace, Sebastian said dryly. They spent weeks positioning you as an outcast. Now they need to reposition you as a tragic heroine. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. You don't have to see them if you don't want to. No, I should. Eliza climbed out of bed, reaching for her robe. If I hide, they'll create their own story about what last night meant. Better to control the narrative ourselves. Look at you thinking like a duchess. I am a duchess. About time I started acting like one. An hour later, Eliza descended to the drawing room dressed in emerald silk that brought out the color of her eyes.
Sebastian had returned to his own chambers to change, but he joined her before the visitors were shown in, a united front. Lady Pemberton swept in first, followed by the Duchess of Somerset, Lady Winters, and half a dozen other society matrons who'd been whispering about Eliza just days before. "Your Graces," Lady Pemberton gushed, settling onto the settee with theatrical flair. "We simply had to call. After last night's revelations, we felt it essential to express our support, and—" she paused delicately. "Our deepest apologies for any distress our silence may have caused." "Your silence was deafening," Eliza said coolly, "as was your willingness to believe lies without evidence." The room went quiet. Sebastian's hand found the small of her back, supportive, not controlling. "You're absolutely right," the Duchess of Somerset said, surprising everyone.
"We failed you, Your Grace. We allowed ourselves to be manipulated by a woman whose cruelty we should have recognized. That's unforgivable." "It's also understandable," Eliza said, softening slightly. "Miranda is very good at manipulation. She fooled everyone, including my husband." "Nevertheless," Lady Pemberton interjected, "we should have given you the benefit of the doubt. You're one of us now, a duchess, a member of the highest echelons of society. We should protect our own." Eliza bit back a sharp response. One of us now, as if her worth had only become apparent after she'd proven herself in combat, as if she hadn't deserved basic decency before that. But Sebastian spoke before she could. "My wife was worthy of protection from the moment we married. Her title didn't make her valuable. Her character did. The fact that society needed proof of that before offering support says more about society than it does about her." The matrons shifted uncomfortably. "You're quite right, Your Grace," the Duchess of Somerset said quietly. "And we should do better. Which is why we've come to extend an invitation. The Queen is hosting a reception at Windsor next month. We'd like to ensure the Duchess receives a personal invitation and a place of honor." It was a significant gesture. A reception at Windsor, personally attended by the Queen, with a place of honor. It would cement Eliza's position in society irrevocably. "That's very kind," Eliza said carefully, "though I confess I'm still learning the intricacies of court protocol. I wouldn't want to embarrass anyone." "Nonsense," Lady Pemberton said. "We'll help you prepare. Consider it our way of making amends. You'll have the best tutors, the finest gowns, everything you need to shine. And," Lady Winters added, "we'd like to propose you for membership in the Ladies' Charitable Society. It's one of the most prestigious organizations in London. Your position as Duchess makes you eligible, and your recent—" she paused. "Ordeal makes you uniquely qualified to advocate for women facing social persecution." Eliza blinked. The Ladies' Charitable Society was indeed prestigious and powerful. Membership meant influence, connections, the ability to actually affect change. "I'd be honored," she said. The visit continued for another hour, the matrons offering advice, gossip, and what seemed like genuine friendship. By the time they left, Eliza's head was spinning. "That was surreal," she said once she and Sebastian were alone again. "Yesterday they were ready to ruin me. Today they're falling over themselves to help." "That's society," Sebastian said, "fickle and self-serving. They support winners and abandon losers. You proved yourself a winner, so now they want to claim you as one of their own. It feels hollow." "It is hollow, but it's also useful. If you're going to be Duchess of Ashcroft, you need allies. These women can open doors, create opportunities, protect you from future attacks." He took her hand. "Use them. Let them make amends by actually being helpful, and in the process, maybe change what it means to be part of their circle." "Change it how?" "Make it about more than gossip and social climbing. The Ladies' Charitable Society actually does good work. They support orphanages, help women in difficult situations, fund schools. If you're part of it, you can shape that work. Make it matter." The idea sparked something in Eliza. Purpose. Real purpose, beyond managing a household or producing an heir. "I could do that," she said slowly. "I could actually make a difference." "You already have. You've changed me." He pulled her close. "Now go change the world." "Tit, Over the following weeks, Eliza threw herself into her new role with determined energy. She attended meetings of the Ladies' Charitable Society, where she pushed for more aggressive support of women fleeing abusive situations. She visited the orphanages and schools they funded, seeing firsthand where money was needed most. She used her position to advocate for causes that mattered: education for girls, better working conditions for servants, legal protections for women trapped in impossible marriages. And slowly, almost without realizing it, she transformed from the desperate girl who'd been bought to cover debts into a woman of genuine influence and power. Sebastian watched the transformation with something like awe. The shy, uncertain duchess who'd moved through Ashcroft House like a ghost had become a force, passionate, articulate, unwilling to accept injustice simply because it was traditional. They grew closer, too, in ways both small and significant. Breakfast became a shared meal where they discussed their days. Evenings were spent in the library, Sebastian working through business correspondence, while Eliza read or wrote letters for her charitable work. They talked, really talked, about everything from politics to poetry to their childhoods. Eliza learned that Sebastian had wanted to be an architect before his father's death had forced him into the role of Duke, that he still sketched building designs late at night when he couldn't sleep, that he'd once had a younger sister who'd died of scarlet fever when she was 6, and he still missed her terribly. Sebastian learned that Eliza had taught herself Latin from her father's old books, that she wrote poetry but never showed anyone because she was convinced it was terrible, that she'd once wanted to travel to Egypt and see the pyramids but had resigned herself to never leaving England. Why resigned? Sebastian asked one evening as they sat by the fire in her chambers. Because duchesses don't go gallivanting off to foreign countries. They stay home and manage estates and attend garden parties. Who says? Everyone. Society. Propriety. Society said you were an adulteress last month. Society was wrong. He set aside his correspondence. What if we went? To Egypt, I mean, in the spring, when the weather's good for travel. Eliza stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. I have business interests in Alexandria, trade routes, shipping contracts. I could easily justify a trip, and I've always wanted to see the ancient sites. He smiled. We could hire guides, see the pyramids, sail up the Nile, make an adventure of it. Sebastian, that's not how this works. We can't just... Why not? We're wealthy, we're titled, we can do whatever we want as long as we're discreet about it. He reached for her hand. I spent 5 years being cold and closed off because I thought that was strength. I don't want to spend the next 5 being conventional because I think that's what's expected. I want to live, Eliza, with you. If that means scandalizing society by taking my wife to Egypt, so be it. She felt tears prick her eyes. You really mean this? Every word. Then yes, let's go to Egypt. Let's scandalize everyone. He pulled her into his arms, and she felt his laughter rumble through his chest. We're going to be the talk of London. We already are. Then we might as well earn it. The Queen's reception at Windsor came in late December. Eliza had spent weeks preparing, learning the intricate protocols of court presentation, practicing her curtsy until her legs ached, being fitted for a gown that cost more than her family's entire annual income had been. The night of the reception, she stood before her mirror in cream silk and diamonds, the Ashcroft emeralds at her throat, and barely recognized herself. She looked regal, confident, like she belonged. Sebastian appeared in the doorway, dressed in formal black, and stopped short. You're stunning, he breathed. I'm terrified. You're allowed to be both. He crossed to her, offering his arm. Ready to meet the Queen? No, but I'll do it anyway. The reception was held in Windsor's grand ballroom, a space so opulent it made Ashcroft House look modest. Hundreds of guests in their finest, all glittering with jewels and ambition, all watching as the Duke and Duchess of Ashcroft were announced. They processed through the room, acknowledging greetings, until they reached the throne where Queen Victoria sat, small and severe in black mourning silk despite the festive occasion. Eliza sank into her practiced curtsy, holding it while Sebastian bowed. Your Majesties, he said formally. Ashcroft. The Queen's voice was clipped, assessing. And this is your new Duchess. We've heard quite a lot about you, my dear. Eliza rose carefully. I hope not all of it was scandal, Your Majesty. A ghost of a smile touched the Queen's lips.
Some of it was, but we find ourselves impressed by your response to said scandal. It takes courage to defend one's honor against such calculated cruelty. Thank you, Your Majesty. We understand you've become quite involved with the Ladies' Charitable Society, that you're advocating for reforms to help women in difficult circumstances. Yes, Your Majesty.
I believe we have an obligation to use our positions to help those without such advantages.
Well said.
The Queen studied her with sharp eyes. You're young for a duchess. Many would have crumbled under the pressure you faced. That you didn't speaks well of your character and your husband's wisdom in choosing you. It was as close to approval as the Queen was likely to give. Eliza felt warmth bloom in her chest. Thank you, Your Majesty. That means more than I can express. The Queen nodded dismissively, and they moved on, making way for the next guests. Well, Sebastian murmured as they descended from the dais, that went better than expected. The Queen doesn't usually compliment anyone under 40. I think I'm going to be sick. Not on the Queen's carpet, please. The scandal would be worse than Miranda's conspiracy. Eliza laughed, the tension breaking. You're terrible. I'm honest, there's a difference. They circulated through the reception, accepting congratulations, making small talk, presenting the united front they'd perfected over the past weeks. But beneath it all, Eliza felt something new, genuine comfort, belonging, not because she'd forced herself to fit, but because she'd proven she deserved to be there. Near midnight, as the reception was winding down, a courier arrived with a message for Sebastian. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. What is it? Eliza asked. Miranda's trial concluded today. She's been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge sentenced her to 5 years imprisonment and seizure of her assets. He folded the letter. Nathaniel and his mother were also found guilty. They've been stripped of their positions in my line of succession. That's everything she feared, complete ruin. Yes, Sebastian's voice was quiet. I should feel vindicated, triumphant even. But mostly I just feel tired and sorry that it came to this.
You still care about her, Eliza said, not accusing, just observing. I care about who she could have been, if she'd made different choices. But that's not my burden to carry anymore. He took Eliza's hand. My responsibility is to you, to us, to the life we're building together. A life that includes Egypt, a life that includes Egypt, charitable work, probably scandalizing society on a regular basis, and he paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. Maybe, someday when we're ready, children who'll grow up knowing they're loved, not just heirs to a title. Eliza felt her throat tighten with emotion. I'd like that. All of it. Good. Because I have approximately 50 years of emotional constipation to make up for, and I'm going to need a very patient partner. She laughed through sudden tears. I think I can manage that. He pulled her close, there in the midst of Windsor's grand ballroom, surrounded by the cream of British society, and kissed her. Not the chaste peck expected of married couples at court functions, but a real kiss, claiming and tender and full of promise. When they pulled apart, half the room was staring. We're definitely going to be the talk of London now, Eliza whispered. Good, Sebastian said. Let them talk. Let them see what a real marriage looks like. Spring came to London in a rush of green and gold, tulips blooming in the parks, warmth returning to the grey city. And on a bright April morning, the Duke and Duchess of Ashcroft boarded a ship bound for Alexandria. Eliza stood at the railing as the vessel pulled away from the dock, watching England recede into the distance. Beside her, Sebastian's hand covered hers, warm and solid. Any regrets? He asked. None. She turned to him, smiling, though I imagine we're going to cause an absolute scandal. A duchess traveling to foreign lands with her husband? How terribly improper. His eyes were warm with affection and something deeper, something that looked remarkably like love. What will people say? They'll say the Duke of Ashcroft has gone mad, that his young wife has corrupted him, turned him soft, made him forget his duty. And what do you say? Sebastian pulled her close, tucking her against his side as the wind whipped their hair and the ship cut through the waves toward adventure. I say I was half dead until I married you.
I say you saved my life without even trying. I say I'm the luckiest man in England, and I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks." Eliza leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his embrace, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily, naturally, like something she'd always known but only now had the courage to speak. "I love you too," Sebastian replied. "I think I have for weeks now. I was just too stubborn to admit it." "What changed your mind?" "You did. Every day. Every conversation. Every time you demanded I be better than my worst self." He kissed the top of her head. "You're magnificent, Eliza Ashcroft. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." The ship sailed on, carrying them away from London's grey streets and rigid expectations, toward ancient wonders and new adventures. Behind them, society would gossip and speculate and probably condemn. But ahead lay possibility, genuine partnership, real love, a life built not on duty or obligation but on choice. Eliza had been sold into marriage to save her family from ruin. She'd been isolated, mocked, nearly destroyed by jealousy and spite. She'd faced down London's cruelest society matrons and emerged victorious. But her greatest victory wasn't social approval or royal favor or even her husband's love, though all of those mattered. Her greatest victory was standing here on the deck of a ship sailing toward Egypt, having claimed her own life, having refused to be diminished by circumstances or defeated by cruelty, having transformed herself from a desperate girl with no choices into a woman who made her own destiny. The Duchess they despised had become the woman they couldn't ignore, and she was just getting started. As the English coastline disappeared into the mist, Eliza turned to Sebastian with a smile that held all the promise of their future. "Tell me about Egypt," she said. "Tell me everything." And as he did, describing pyramids and ancient temples and adventures yet to come, Eliza realized something profound. She'd been bought for duty, but she'd found freedom. She'd married a stranger, but she'd discovered love. She'd entered a cage, but she'd learned to fly. And the story they'd write together, the Duke and his fierce Duchess, partners in scandal and adventure and genuine devotion, that story was just beginning. The ship sailed on into morning light, carrying them toward a life they'd both choose every single day. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to, and that made all the difference.